Well, Tamiya fans, here it is, the new CC-02. I know a lot of you have been waiting to check this rig out, and I can't wait to show it to you. There is a lot to go over because it's completely different from the CC-01, down to even the front suspension. I know everybody wanted the IFS front suspension on this, but they went with a solid axle up front. Lots of details to go over here, but first we got to start off with the body. And for the release of this truck, they went with the Mercedes-Benz G500, which is a very cool off-road vehicle. Really getting a lot of attention lately, and in Tamiya fashion, they did an amazing job replicating the body in 1/10 scale form. And let's just start going over all the details. Now, as you probably know, it's a full build-up kit. A lot of Tamiya kits are full build-up kits, so you get to enjoy the building and modeling experience. And yes, you even have to paint the body. The majority of your time is just going to be put into this body. There's a lot of work to it, a lot of painting going on. I think there was 5 cans of different paint that I had to use, even a little jar of paints, black paint for some of the detail work and stuff like that. But in the end, it's all worth it. This thing looks amazing. I think there was over 80 decals on here. You gotta place them on there. I used a heat gun to kind of form them over some of the different lines and stuff like that. The grille on this is actually a separate piece. This chrome grille up front, which is very cool that they did that rather than a decal. You do have to go and paint the insert of the grille there with a semi-gloss black, so I did that. And the headlight buckets actually integrate into the body on the back side of it, which is really nice. And they screw in rather than two-side tape in, which is something that a lot of Tamiya bodies have. I really like that they went with the hard mount with screw type method because it doesn't vibrate loose or fall off when you're on the trail. The taillights, however, the taillight buckets, which are hidden underneath the decals, those are two-side taped in, but they have really large panels on them, so you can put a lot of two-side tape on them, and those shouldn't fall off. But other details I want to point out here is we've got this spare tire cover on the back, an ABS plastic molded piece, and you have to go and paint that the two-tone. And it actually even has an insert in there for the Mercedes logo. And then up front here we do have the mirrors that are separate pieces. You actually have to go and paint them 2 different colors. We've got the gunmetal and the semi-gloss black, but it looks really good with those mirrors on there. Now, the other thing that I do want to point out is it does come with LED lights, which is pretty awesome. I really like when Tamiya includes the light set in there. So there are LED lights in the front and there are LED lights for the tail lights, and they give you the module for it. Even the connectors for powering that module from the main battery pack. It is fitted with some Tamiya plugs, but they do get the job done. I'll probably swap those out later. And again, I think this just looks great. Tamiya quality is all there. They did a fantastic job with it. And now onto the wheels. We've got the spoke style wheels. It's a silver wheel, 12mm hex on those wheels with a rubber tire on there. Let me just get this body off. Now, it's kind of just their basic street tread tire, and this is kind of where I wish Tamiya really made some changes as well. Rather than using the stock tire that they've had for the longest time, it's a really hard tire. I mean, this is a cross country. That's what CC stands for, so it's not like this, major rock crawling vehicle, in my opinion. It's more for some overland adventures and stuff like that, but I really wish they went and softened up the tires or maybe even came out with a new tread for that crawling that we want to do. It is going to be a capable crawler, not massive stuff, but I wish, the tire fit it. But enough about that. Let's move on to the chassis here because this is an all-new chassis. And as I said earlier, this is no longer an IFS front suspension, independent front suspension. We have axles both front and rear now. But I'm going to start off by just talking about the chassis details itself. So it's a ladder frame style of chassis. It's not a full metal chassis, which is pretty interesting. The center section here, both sides are plastic frames, and then we have stamped steel C-channels, both front and rear, where the shock towers mount to. So it's pretty interesting that they went that route. There are multiple holes here, so you could go and move the shock towers forward and backward, and that's basically to help adjust with wheelbase. I assume they're going to have different wheelbase options for different bodies that they have, and so that allows some adjustability there. But this isn't a standard 1/10 scale style of platform, not your SCX-10 size platform. It's a little bit smaller and it fits the Tamiya bodies. They will fit onto this chassis. So like your FJ that they have, that will fit on there as well. But the chassis itself overall, very Tamiya-like. There's a number of different components to it. It's just, everything about it when you're putting it together, it says Tamiya. There's actually a lot of hardware on this chassis. It's not a simplified modified chassis. It's fairly simple to put it together, but you know, there's just a lot of different components to it. So we've got, you know, a cross member up front here. We've got the servo mount right behind it, and you could actually put the servo mount, you know, so you could face the servo down or have it laid flat like I have it here. So it's pretty interesting. They give you that option for mounting. We've got a center mounting plate here. It's not actually a skid. The transmission actually hangs down below the mounting area here, but it basically gives you your points for mounting your suspension or a bracket to mount your suspension, because the mounting points are separate here for the links as well. But you can see that transmission sticking down, and of course it supports the center section. Now in the back here, this is where the battery goes. Obviously you can see that battery tray back there. It's just got a nice simple battery strap, so you go and pop that out and slide a standard style battery. And the battery plate actually firms up the rear of the chassis, and what I found interesting is it's got this little flex plate in the rear, and you could actually go and take the rear mount out, and I believe that's so you could go slide the battery in from the rear of the truck if you want to. I'm just guessing. It looks like it could also be solid mounted in there, but I just found that interesting that they didn't tell you to put screws in the back, especially when they got a battery security plate up front here. But if you know why they did that, please feel free to put it in the comment section below. We could talk about it some more. But overall, the chassis looks very cool. We've got you know, these tall body mounts out back. I like how they've got a nice brace across, short mounts in the front. Actually, the body posts were very tall. I had to go and cut them down. So again, you go put different bodies on there and adjust the body height when you get these posts, if you get some extra posts. And then we've got these little wing plates here that basically stick off the side of the frame, and that allows you to mount your speed controller. And they do give you a box here, so you can go put your receiver in there. It's not a sealed box, so that was kind of interesting that they didn't do that. But at least they give you a box to go put your wires in, your receiver in, and any other small little details that you want to put into the receiver box, maybe a BEC, I don't know. But it looks pretty. It's a pretty neat looking chassis. Again, you know, it takes a bit of work to get it together. It's fairly simple to put it together, but in the end, it carries that Tamiya look that we know and love. All right, so up front, there's a bumper, and you can actually adjust the height of this bumper, which I thought was pretty cool. They give you little insert plates in there to raise and lower it up, so you could change your approach angle to this. But, you know, a basic looking bumper. I think that wraps it up for the chassis itself. Let me move on to the suspension. That'll be pretty quick. So we've got oil-filled shocks on here now, and it's kind of the shocks we've seen before from Tamiya on some of their off-road vehicles. I like that they went and put some oil dampers on this, and they actually give you 2 bottles of oil. When's the last time you see a Tamiya vehicle with 2 bottles of oil to fill up the shocks? But when they are done, they're pretty smooth. We got O-rings on the inside, just a steel plate on the top of the shock shaft to act as the piston in there. But it gets the job done. I really like that they included those versus just their friction shocks like they've done on so many of their other vehicles. The suspension links on here are plastic. We've got these large boxy style of lower links and then a rod style of upper link. It is fixed. You don't get to adjust it, but it's set to the length that it obviously needs to be. There are plastic pivot balls in there. I kind of would have liked to have seen some metal pivot balls in there, but the plastics do work well. And again, 4-link both front and rear, and it seems to work pretty well. And you know, I do see some adjustability down here, as I mentioned before, with the shock towers. There are some additional holes down here so you can move the link mounts, and the link mounts are separate. So it's separate from this lower plate, and it's separate from the axle. So if something happens, you could go and just replace, you know, that link mount versus just replacing a whole axle or something like that. So you have that option if something happens, and that's really it for the suspension. It feels pretty smooth. You know, I don't think it's going to have some crazy articulation to it like we were used to seeing with some other vehicles, but you know, to the scale of this, I think that's pretty decent. All right, now let's talk about the drivetrain, and we'll start off with the center transmission here. And it's a pretty neat looking transmission. You know, it's got some details to it. It's formed in gray plastic. But this transmission, you could actually build it 2 separate ways, 2 different gear ratios, I should say. So depending on how you place the gears on the inside of the transmission, you'll have a low ratio or a high ratio. And then on top of that, you could of course go and adjust the pinions. They sell different size pinion gears, like every vehicle out there, but that will go and adjust your ratio even more. They even give you some details in the instructions on how to set the different ratios with the different pinion gears. So it's nice that they gave you that chart in there. But the gears inside are all plastic. It is all bushings, guys. There's some metal, bronze bushings, I should say, and mostly plastic bushings. I built this kit with ball bearings. Just had to go with the bearings on there. So, typical Tamiya fashion, they give you the bushings and the bearings are the option part. But the transmission goes together fairly easily. No hiccups in putting that together. And then we have the axles, the solid axles front and rear here. And what's really nice about these, when you go and build these up, you have an option for the differentials. So you could build it up with these lockers that they have that kind of integrate into one of the spider gears in there, or they give you the gears so you could have a open differential. I went and built them both locked up, and so you could build it with the front open, an open differential in the front, and you could have it locked out in the rear. You could build it so they're both open. You could go build it however you want. And, maybe have fun with it, tuning it as you go. I mean, that's what this is all about. It's really nice that they have steel drive shafts in there, a dog bone style in the front that goes out to the axle cup, and in the rear it's just a solid shaft out to the back. It's a pretty nice looking axle. There is a lot of hardware on the axle to put it together. The C-hubs are not separate in the front. They are integrated into the axle itself, and then the steering knuckle on the outside is a plastic steering knuckle. And it's got a large bearing in there to support that drive axle. It looks just fine. It's going to do fine for this style of vehicle. And now finally in the center we do have some slider drive shafts. Pretty easy to put together. They slide smooth. The pins on the universal itself are a little small, but for the torque of this motor, I don't foresee any problems there. Or with the plastic drive shafts themselves, maybe if you get caught up in something and you're really wrenching on the throttle, something would happen. But again, for stock out of the box, this will be just fine. All right, steering, we've got a simple steering setup up front. We've got our steering link across here. We've got a metal drag link over from the servo to the steering arm, and it's a basic setup that we've seen on so many crawlers before. And now we can move on to the electronics. Now, some of the electronics are included. We've got the 540 Mabuchi motor here, the CAN motor we're so used to seeing, and then over here they give you the TBLE 02S speed controller. So this is a brushed and brushless motor speed controller that you find on all of Tamiya's cars lately that include speed controllers. Great speed controller. I love the way it works, so hopefully it's going to work well in this cross-country situation as well. It does have a Tamiya plug on there. I'm probably going to cut that off and go put a Dean's connector on there. But they do give you that. They give you the speed controller, they give you the motor, so you're already on your way. All you need to provide is the radio system and the servo. So up front, I have a Futaba 9452 servo. Futaba helped us out and got us set up with that. It's a metal geared servo and will have plenty of torque for this particular application. And I'm going to go and actually use my 4PM radio that's over there and control this truck with it. So that'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to actually test that out as well. But it's a pretty cool looking truck. I like what they've done here. I like that they kept it the size that they've had for so long, so you could go and use all of their other bodies with it. And I could see people really getting into this. I mean, it's a little bit of a bummer that they went away from that IFS again in the front, but I like this new offering. It's very cool. I think a lot of people are going to get into customizing this one. It'll be cool to see what people come up with. So that just leaves going out and having some fun with it. And we're going to see what type of terrain this truck can tackle. I have to tell you, Tamiya kits are a great way to get the entire modeling experience all in one package. The kit build on this is a lot of fun, you know, just putting everything together. Then you get to the body and you get to put on all the details and you watch the truck come alive, and then you of course get to go out and drive it. And you know, I just came back from a couple of different trail runs, just had a great time with this rig. Now to test it out, I went over to one of my local spots. It's just a little ways down the road from me, and it's where I take a lot of the 10 scale crawlers that we get here on the channel to test out. And, you know, I kind of just went and forced this thing into that type of situation, you know, because it's got the new kind of ladder frame style chassis on there. We've got independent axles front and rear. And I just kind of thought that this is kind of a crawler. Let me go see how it crawls. I mean, I know those tires were kind of a street tire, but I'm like, let me see how it's going to do. I think that's what a lot of people are looking at. And after being there for just a few minutes, I kind of realized that this is still the CC, the cross-country vehicle, where, you know, it really likes going on trails and stuff like that, where you're going over rolling mounds of dirt and smooth rock faces and stuff like that, versus, you know, trying to find some jagged rocks to crawl over. It really wasn't at home there. So, you know, as soon as I kind of figured out where this thing is really belongs, you know, it's a model, it belongs in the cross-country type of setting, I changed things up, and that's kind of where I started to drive it. And that's when I really started to have a lot of fun with the CC-02. You know, can it be a rock crawler? Yeah, it can be. I'll get into a little bit more of that later. But let's just, you know, I wanted to kind of set the stage of the experience of it, you know, where it felt at home. So, you know, when I start talking about more of the performance details, you kind of have that setting in mind. So, you know, again, on the trails, it's a lot of fun. I mean, you know, just kind of getting down there and getting scale with some of the maneuvers, some of the driving aspects of it. It looks really cool out there. The steering on here, you make sure you have a radio that has adjustable endpoints. You know, because of the way the servo is situated, it has a bit more steering to the left, if I remember correctly, than the right. And so, you know, if you have endpoint adjustments on there, you could adjust it. I think that the servo arm, the servo horn needs to be a bit longer. I don't think it needs the servo saver, which is on here. So if you want to go and grab an aftermarket horn that is a bit longer, I think you can get the full steering throw, and you can get some decent steering throw out of it. You can get it to the point where the wheels are actually touching the shocks on the inside, and that will give you some good throw for the steering. But within the settings that I was driving in, the steering was just fine. It had all the steering that I needed. You know, no clicking from the axles or anything like that. So steering was on par for the type of vehicle, for the size of the vehicle. The speed of it. So I built this with the high gear ratio. You could also build it with a low gear ratio. You just move some gears around in the transmission. And on the high side of things, it was a bit too fast. It was a little bit more than scale. So if you're picking this truck up for more of like a backyard basher, you just want to kind of zip around your backyard or up and down your driveway or something like that, you know, build it up with the high ratio. Now, if you want to go out and do some more scale type of crawling, driving over trails, I would say go put the low ratio in. I had a lot more fun with it like that. It was a bit easier to drive. The speed controller on this is their universal speed controller, so it really doesn't have the settings for crawling applications. Where I found a bit of an issue was no drag brake, basically. I read the speed controller instructions. If this was a brushless motor in here, I could tune the drag brake. However, for the brush motor, there is no tuning. So there was a lot of roll. So when I wanted to descend hills, it would kind of roll out a bit faster than I wanted to. If I was climbing something, I let off the throttle, it would instantly roll backwards. So you want to do a bit more of a hardcore crawl, you want to go and source out a crawler specific speed controller, so you have the braking, so you have the smooth low end. That's another thing, you know, because this is a universal speed controller, like, you know, you go put in a buggy and have fun punching it, but when you're looking for that really low speed smooth crawl, it kind of just fades in and out, and it's kind of jittery. So it's good for driving around, good for bombing around, but that scale crawling type of stuff, not quite there. All right, now onto the suspension. The suspension was a little on the bouncy side, so when I was kind of hauling down some of the trails, it was bouncing around a little bit. But you know, when I started to crawl some stuff, some smaller rocks and stuff like that, which I was able to do, You know, I could see the suspension working. You know, the articulation was there. It's really a tiny tire truck, like almost like a 1.55 feel to it. So you got to watch your lines and stuff. You know, the axles are low on this. The whole truck is low. It's a smaller truck than, let's say, an SCX-10. So you got to keep it in mind, and you got to scale down the type of obstacles you're going to attack. And once you do that, you know, you'll find it easier to crawl over stuff. But I think the suspension worked pretty well. I think the CG on this is actually pretty good. I did find some smooth rocks to crawl up, and I was able to crawl up some pretty steep inclines after a tire change. Now, you know, it's got those street slick tires on there. I did get a set of the Tamiya mud blocks. You know, they work a bit better than the stock tire. It still really needs a better tire if you want to go and do some more intense crawling. But these mud blocks actually gave it some more traction. And so, you know, those were the changes that I made to it. It was the mud block tires. I went and swapped out the gear ratio on there. Had a lot more fun with it. And there's still a couple more things I want to do. Want to add that servo horn on there. I want to add the different speed controller on there. And I think I could go have, you know, even more fun with it. Now, can this be a capable crawler? Yeah, I think it can be. Again, it's got a smaller platform, so you got to kind of think of that when you're changing, you know, body styles and stuff like that. I mean, this is kind of, you know, it's a Mercedes, so, you know, crawling up some steep rocks, I don't really see it doing that. But, you know, if you're going to go and swap a bunch of things out on here, I think the chassis itself is very capable. I could see a lot of people really getting into this chassis and modifying it and having a lot of fun with it. But, you know, as a scale model, something that you could go build up and really experience RC with, I mean, it's all there. It's on point with what Tamiya does. And, you know, it's just a fun rig overall. And it looks great sitting on the shelf as well. It's a durable machine, no issues with it out on the trail. My mirrors are pretty scuffed up, and I spent a lot of time painting those. So I'm a little bummed out about that. But you know what? I had to put it through its paces. I had to show you guys what it could do. And overall, just a great experience from Tamiya. I do like the CC-02. It's a great addition to the, you know, huge line of different Tamiya vehicles that you get. And if you're a Tamiya collector, yeah, it's one of those things that you have to have in your collection.